Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. The last 3 videos I released share a consistent theme. First, we talked about the rebirth of the Bible-thumping televangelists and their war on lust in gaming, and how it mirrors the war of the SJWs on the problematics in gaming. Then we talked about moral puritanism in general, and how it's a mask for one's own sins, and leads to a disappointing road to nowhere good. And finally, we talked about the culture war grift and the Plato's Cave allegory mindset that it creates. But what is motivating all of these things? Why do purveyors of such things still get audiences so easily? Well, we're gonna answer that, and the answer is really simple. Rage, anger, wrath. The people on both sides of the aisle that push such authoritarian agendas rely on appealing to the emotion of anger in their viewers to get them to stop thinking logically and go along with their agenda. And they're able to do that because of all emotions, anger is the least logical and rational and most driven of them all. Hence why wrath is considered a sin. Think about the last time you've been angry. I mean really angry. Did you want to hurt someone? Maybe destroy something? Do you remember feeling like the only way you'd feel better is if you annihilated the thing that was making you angry? Did you forget about all sense of logic, reason, and even morality behind your actions and desires? If you hit something like a wall or a door, did it hurt? And did you care? People do many things harmful to themselves and others when they're angry. It's part of what the emotion is for. It's a flight or fight response that is intended to keep you alive in times where survival is key. The thing is, though, in the modern day and age, we live in very safe times, yet our instincts will still take us over and cause us to do things we will very soon regret. A lot of crimes of passion are done out of anger, especially murder and assault. When you're angry, nothing else matters but your anger and the thing making you angry. The whole world around you could end, but you wouldn't care. This is what makes characters like the Incredible Hulk, the Red Lanterns, Kratos from God of War, Guts from Berserk, and others so compelling, because they are driven primarily by their anger, and anger is a very primal, instinctual thing that every human being can relate to. But the problem is in this. Anger is an addiction. People feel good when they can direct their anger at something, usually an enemy, because it makes them feel good. It takes the blame off themselves and externalizes it. To quote John Cleese, the great thing about having enemies is you can pretend that all the badness in the whole world is in your enemies, and all the goodness in the whole world is in you. Attractive, isn't it? You can strut around, abusing people, telling them you can eat them for breakfast, and still think of yourself as a fighter for the people, a champion of the greater good, not the rather sad, paranoid schizoid you really are. Anger is the primary lifeblood and fuel for any extremist movement. From the Jacobin revolutionaries of France to the Russian Revolution of the early 20th century, from the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo to the anti-Vietnam War hippie movement of the 1960s, many political and social movements were primarily fueled by rage. And that rage caused things like beheadings, genocides, mass starvations, wars, assaults, acts of terror, and so on and so forth. Granted, not every act of anger by a person or a group is bad or unjustified. The American Revolution was founded on anger against an apathetic and uncaring parliament that laid 3,000 miles away from its citizen colonists it claimed to speak for. Wyatt Earp's vendetta raids targeted the Cochise County cowboys who, until that point, were not being prosecuted for their numerous crimes by a corrupt Democrat political establishment in Tombstone. And let us not forget that time the Imperial Japanese Navy destroyed an American naval base, killing almost 100 men, so we dropped 2 literal sons on them. But that's the thing. Those men knew the difference between justified and unjustified anger. Those 3 examples stand out because, even with the case of the Japanese in World War II, it was the last resort after all other options were exhausted. It is okay to be angry, but it's not okay to act in anger unless you have no other choice. That's what the issue with the current 2 forms of cultural and social extremism are. On one side, you have Antifa and its supporters who take their anger out over things they don't even understand on the innocent, and on the other, you have more focused culture warrior anger that is less outwardly destructive and more self-destructive in how it operates. The former group, Antifa, and the far left in general, are made up of masses who listen and believe what they're told by the media and react outwardly in anger. They are presented a picture where a conspiratorial group of capitalist elites are using them as slave labor, and the only way that they will break their chains is through violent revolution. Never mind that these same elites are the ones painting that picture for them, and never mind that these people who adhere to these beliefs are some of the most privileged to ever exist in history. Nonetheless, this is what inspired the Summer of Love riots, the Antifa movement, the Capitol Hill autonomous zones, and the insurrections on the Capitol on January of 2017 and January of 2025, and so on and so forth. All of which caused billions of dollars in property damage and led to standoffs with the police, as well as some cases of murder, rape, and assault. On the other hand, you got the culture warrior movement. They do not engage with such outward riots like the left wing do. That is by and large because they are a contrast in that they take their anger inwards. Like Antifa, many culture warriors listen and believe various figures like John De La Rose, Grums, Pirate Nation, Ethan Van Sciver, or others, that there is a conspiratorial group operating to infiltrate their media, and that the only way they can do anything about it is to buy their comic books about frogs, donate to their Patreons, and otherwise act like assholes on the internet. While both sides are angry at very legitimate things, it's things that they don't really fully comprehend half the time. And when they can comprehend it, they draw the wrong conclusions, such as blaming everything on either capitalism or Judaism. But these two groups, again, do have legitimate grievances. The big banks and big business are very corrupt, and there is a movement to turn media into propaganda for the powers that be, but neither rioting and burning down cities, nor acting like a paranoid loony online is going to do anything about that. What's worse is that these extremist acts of anger, either outward or more contained, cause people who feel this anger to isolate themselves from regular people, and make regular people rethink on ever agreeing with anything they espouse. The last thing you want to do if you're trying to convince people that the banks are evil is to flip over their car and burn down their privately owned sports bar. And the last thing you want to do to get people to listen to you about media censorship is to lie or exaggerate acts that are taking place, or to be inconsistent about what you believe. That and both sides seem to have an anti-Semitism problem they have issues with. But that is the whole problem. Neither side are thinking about the long term because they are too caught up in their own anger. An anger that's being stoked by the mainstream media for the far left and the alternative culture war media for the far right. And neither group thinks about it for a second. They are too addicted to their own outrage to know they're being fleeced, both by the mainstream 24-hour news cycles and the culture war industrial complex alternative media that make their bread and butter off producing outrage in their readers to keep them in just the right state to be controllable, and addicted to reading more, clicking another link, producing more ad revenue. If it bleeds, it leads, and it doesn't matter when you're angry if what you're being told is the truth or not. You could make an entire narrative about how a group of fraternity jocks gang raped a woman, and before the truth is even awake, let alone gotten its pants on, that the woman in question was nowhere near where she was claiming to be that night, a lynch mob has already formed and the boys are hanging from the noose. Or alternatively, you could get people riled up over a supposed unskippable gay cutscene in a computer RPG game that gets people furious at the gay agenda being everywhere, that by the time it comes out it was a baseless shitpost and not true. You could easily move the goalpost to something else not as serious, and they'd still be too anger addicted to realize they're attacking a former ally. We already have instances where people are getting worked up over lies and exaggerations. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop was attacked for being, quote, censored, when the censorship in question was the removal of a few licensed manga costumes and a glitch with the new engine. Otherwise, the game was a 100% remaster from the original. The same thing happened with the announcement of Capcom Fighting Game Collection Volume 2 when it was heard that some of the Midnight Bliss transformations got censored, but on closer examination, it's the one that reused sprites from the Capcom JoJo's Bizarre Adventure arcade game that were censored. And considering that the game is not part of this collection, it was obviously done due to license reasons. That being said, a re-release of that 2D fighting game would be dope. And maybe a beat-em-up collection volume 2 featuring the Alien vs Predator beat-em-up and Marvel War of the Gems. Do it, Capcom, you pussies! Anyway, it's because the anti-woke culture warriors were so addicted to the feeling of being angry, they didn't realize they were making fools of themselves. Same with the Kingdom Come Deliverance attacks, and no doubt this will continue to happen in the future as well. It's not the same as the Duke Lacrosse case in which actual people had their lives ruined, but it comes from the same source. An addiction to anger and a careless journalist class that doesn't care that their lies and exaggerations have consequences, only in what it produces them in views and clicks. And you do not need to be on the left or the right to know that there should be ethical standards in any form of journalism, and that they apply to everyone regardless of their political teams or cultural alignments. But it's not just the dealers of anger addiction who are at fault. The addicts are just as much to blame. People need to calm down, take a step back, and realize what they're doing is counterproductive to what they think they want. Acting out in anger never leads anywhere good, and it usually leads to prison if it's done outwardly enough. Even contained anger in constant dosage is not healthy and produces a negative mindset that is addicted to anger and drama and loses sight of what's good in life. People caught up in anger need to admit they have a problem before any good can come to them. And the first step in fighting an addiction is admitting that you have one and that it's a problem. And only then can they begin the road to managing their addiction and quitting their destructive behaviors. And until that day comes, this has been the Koopa Man. If you like this video, leave a like and subscribe as it helps me with the algorithm. If you have examples of rage addiction or those who deal with rage addicts, talk about them in the comments as I'd love to know other examples I've missed. And until next time, game on.